Hey everyone, and welcome to our webinar, which is New Lead Strategies Leveraging RTO and Layoff Data. This is hosted by Coffee Closers and Tech in Real Estate. This session will be recorded and posted on YouTube, so don't worry about taking notes. You can ask questions in the chat as well. Our speakers today include myself and Liam from Coffee Closers, as well as Evo, co-founder of Batch Service. And today we're going to cover a few different topics, including lead generation for RTO leads. And as a bonus, towards the end, we will show a little bit of a preview of what's to come for Coffee Closers 4.0. So let's start by tackling leads. What are leads in real estate? I asked ChatGPT this, but I thought its definition was quite long. So mine's a bit simpler, and leads in real estate is basically someone who is interested to sell their home. But where do we actually find leads in real estate? There's common ways to find people looking to sell their home that we're all pretty familiar with, including Zillow, Redfin, and Realtor. These leads get onto these platforms in a pretty straightforward way. An individual wants to sell their home, they contact an agent to list their property. That agent then lists the property on the MLS. And sites like Zillow, Redfin, and Realtor have feeds to the MLS that then update their websites with the new listings that we see. And because we see them, we call these on-market leads. It's very common for investors to find their first or next investment via on-market leads. But are all leads on market? No. There's also off-market leads, ones that you don't see readily available on public sites. So how do these off-market deals happen? An off-market deal, the agent and the listing are removed from the workflow. Instead, the investor reaches out directly to the homeowner via methods like mailers, texts, or calls to negotiate a deal. And why would someone want to ever sell their property off market? The seller may be looking for a private sale, so they don't have to do things like an open house. They may be looking for a quick sale because they're going through financial hardship or something time sensitive like a relocation. And the seller may not feel confident in showing their property on a major listing site because it needs significant repairs. So we know at this stage what off-market leads are, why a seller would be interested, but what about from the buyer's perspective, from an investor? There can be many reasons, but the main that I see is that usually you could purchase properties at a lower price or what we call under market value by going off market. And everyone, including myself and investors, love a good sale. So I get asked this question time and time again. Ariel, should I look on market or should I look off market? And the answer is it really depends. But some top factors to help you decide is time. Do you have the time to set up marketing campaigns to individual homeowners? So essentially running a business. Do you have the capital to have the reoccurring costs when it comes to starting up and maintaining the business? Does it fit your strategy? Are you looking for properties that meet your strategy like a fix and flip? So I'm going to walk through two quick examples. And I know I'm moving through this fast because I know we have beginners and experts, but I want to make sure we have the foundation of leads. So the question, do we search on market or off market? I'm going to show you two personas here. The first one, we have an investor that is investing in real estate part-time while working a W-2. They have enough saved for a house hack, so a single payment that they're looking to do. Their strategy is long-term buy and hold for a property requiring little to no fixes. Pretty much my strategy when I first started. So what do you think suits them? On market or off market? In this case, on market. Why? They're limited on time. They want to commit to a single payment, not a reoccurring one of starting up a business. And they're looking for turnkey, which there are plenty of on market. Now we have investor number two. And spoiler, it's going to be the opposite. They invest full-time in real estate. and have some other side job in landscaping, but the main thing is real estate. They have the ability to borrow money from private money lenders so they can continuously do deals throughout the month as well as the year. So they're comfortable with spending 3 to 5K on marketing for things like lead generation, as well as direct mailers and targeting. They're looking for distressed properties so they can fix them up and sell them back to investors, which it's easier to find fixer-uppers off market since most of the properties on market look pretty and are good to go. So as I said, this was the flip side. So the answer here is off market would suit this persona better. And why? It's because they have the time to set up the side business, right? They're working on real estate full time. They're okay with spending money on leads, marketing, and staff because they are doing high volume. And they're also looking for properties that need work. So the decision to go on or off market, is it just as simple as these two examples I showed you? Of course not. It's a lot more complex. There are factors like your personality as an investor, your particular market, and your hold strategy of whether you should go on or off market. But for the sake of this presentation, we will move on and go on to lead motivation. How do we actually score leads, right? Which leads are better than others? It's actually pretty simple. We can compare different leads to one another based on motivation to sell, with high being the highest likelihood towards the red of wanting to sell their property. So what do you think would be the highest motivation to wanting to sell their property? It's typically those leads with represented interests. So someone, for example, selling their home with an agent that you see on Zillow. These are the highest for motivation because they have literally raised their hand, signed a contract, and said, I am willing to and want to sell my home. Next is for sale by owner. These are individuals who list their properties on public sites like Zillow, but without an agent. After comes time-bound leads. And now we're going more into the off-market space. These are individuals who may not want to sell their property, but they do. They usually have to, and it's within a limited time frame. So for example, owners in pre-foreclosure and owners needing to relocate for things like a job. Life events come next. This can include divorce, inheritance of a property, and the seller technically sometimes does not have to sell the property, but due to this high stress event, they may want to write off a problem. And lastly, here is inconvenience. This can be tired landlords, folks who owned a property, say, for the last 10 years and now are close to retirement age. They may want to sell for that same reason as the previous ones, the life events, to write off a problem or a headache. And for this session, we are going to focus on RTO leads, return to office leads, which fit time-bound and inconvenience for motivation. But you may be thinking here, why can't we just market to all leads, right? Like, why do we have to narrow down? And I'm going to give you an analogy similar to dating. If you spread yourself thin, you may catch some leads, right? But they may be bad leads and that they ultimately don't fit your hold criteria or exit strategy. So they end up wasting your time. But if you hyper focus on your leads, you will get better results. So how do we find optimal leads, right? What is the magic number, strategy, or thing that we have to do? Well, I've been able to distill this down to 3 factors that we want to solve for. First, pretty obvious, we want to find sellers with high motivation. So people that are either in distress or they have a reason to sell. Next, we want to find leads with low competition. Now, I see this a lot when newbies will go and start marketing towards pre-foreclosure lists, and they're like, I don't understand why I'm not getting any hits. It's because that's a high competition list. You're likely competing against 50 other mailers in that space. So to find optimal leads, you want to find those with lower competition. Stacking can help in this case too. Third, you want to use strategic outreach. You should have a goal in your mind of what you want to do with the property at the end. What's the end strategy? Because you can then market that a lot more effectively to get ahead of competition and close more leads. All right, so we know what optimal leads are, but how do we measure if they're good? Like as we start to get these potential leads, how do we know if we're doing well? There's really one metric that you have to consider. There's also, of course, more, but this is one of the main ones, which is leads to close. This is the number of deals closed over the number of total leads that you have. The higher the percentage, the less money we have to spend to find good deals. So for example, if you have 100 leads and you close one deal from those leads, that's 1%. That's actually pretty hard to achieve, but you need to be able to measure this in order to know how well you're doing and avoid having so much money towards your marketing spend. So this is what we need to optimize for, our leads, to get really good leads and bump this number up of deals closed. So how are we going to find optimal leads? Which this is going to drive us to the main point of this presentation, which is using alternative leads lists. And as an example, we're going to go through return to office leads. So here's a true story of how the RTO leads started, return to office. I was speaking to an investor friend who told me about a recent deal they closed on. It was practically a brand new home he bought on creative finance terms, using subject to the stuff that Pace Morby talks about. This property owner was a guy that worked in a nearby metro area as a software engineer. During COVID, he moved to the burbs since his job went remote. But now they are telling him to go back to office. So he put his home on the market on Zillow to sell it, but no one is buying it. And he can't bring the price down because he has low equity in the home. The only option is to sell via creative finance. So I hear the story and I'm thinking, wait, is this a trend? Is this something that can help us signal distress? So I thought back to my own life experiences. Living in New Jersey, about 45 to 55 minutes outside of New York City. And for some of you, when you think of New Jersey, you may think of crazy sports fans, delis on every corner, and beach boardwalks. While all true, it's also known for some intense commuter traffic, both via bus and train public transit, forcing some people, like myself, to have 2 hours commutes each way. But then something interesting happened, 2020. And there was a huge migration out of major cities, including New York City, which in a 3-year period, as per the US Census, lost about 500,000 residents. But why would people leave, right? So people left because they could trade up. So going from a 2-bed, 2-bath, 1,000-square-foot home in Jersey City, for example, this is a real listing, $5,500 a month. You could then instead trade to go an hour south, say Toms River, to a larger home with a lower monthly cost. Your kids can run around freely in the backyard. It's almost a no-brainer, which is why I would say 9 out of 10 people that I personally know in the New Jersey area did this during the 2020 to 2022, 2023 period. But how could these employees do this? How can they just kind of pick up and be able to move? It's because they didn't have to commute as often to the office via work from home. But now it's 2024. We're in a very different time period with interest rates as well as hiring. CEOs are quitting at a record pace. Large companies are mandating RTO, which for those that don't know, return to office is not for collaboration. That's what they say on the news. It's really because they're planning layoffs and they're hoping they don't have to, have negative press doing so and can have enough employees quit. But the problem is we're not in the same market as we were for tech hiring. It has slowed down considerably, especially with AI. So I'm at this stage where I've had this friend who's told me about this deal they've done. I'm comparing it against my life experiences to think, is this something that could be a trend? Is this truly distress? And I've formulated that we've entered this perfect storm of optimal leads. Property owners in distress, check. At an early stage with limited competition, check. And perfect for strategic outreach, check. We can actually market to these individuals and sound almost like a friend, right? Like, I understand what you're going through. You're returning to office, you recently bought underwater. If you're considering to be able to move, I can help you with creative finance. Now, what would happen if this wasn't a solution, right? You might see someone just kind of go through the commute. If they have a family, that could put a lot of stress. Maybe they end up on a divorce list down the line, but that would literally be like 2 to 3 years out. So this is the advantage in general of alternative leads lists, is you can catch the stress at an early stage. So how do we find these leads? We know these leads are possible. We know they are optimal at this stage. But how do we get this to a list to actually validate our hypothesis that this can be a good leads list? So this is actually my favorite piece, which is also always doing a little bit of research. Anyone on the call who's a data analyst, data scientist, this is one of the most exciting parts of trying to test a hypothesis. So here, I did create a one-pager, which is free. And Maddie, if you don't mind posting it into the chat. This kind of goes through the end result, which is being able to get these leads to a list, filter on equity, as well as on other information. And we also have the playbook of the exact steps I took, as well as the different scrapers I used and the APIs I used as well, which we'll touch on. But let's go through the steps of how you would think about, whether it's RTO or in general, how to obtain alternative leads lists. So my first thing that I was thinking of was, well, I need to understand which companies are doing return to office. So that started with honestly just a simple Google search. And I saw, this is as of last month, Amazon has a mandate for return to office 5 days a week. And a lot of these companies are doing this where they're giving employees about a 3 to 6 month window. So in this case, Amazon has that this will be enacted as of January 1st. And if you want to search, there's plenty other companies that are doing similar type of mandates. Hubble is one of these sites, but this is really updating on a regular basis. So you could just search on Google or ChatGPT. So now I have a company in mind. My hypothesis is that maybe we could reach out to these employees, but I need to focus on where. I can't just look at the whole United States, right? So I look on Amazon's website of where they have headquarters. Where would they have office employees that maybe moved during this time period? Of course, they have an office in Seattle, but they also have an office in Arlington, Virginia, a little bit newer. And having worked for a little bit in the DC area in my commute down to Washington, DC, I knew that they have pretty heavy traffic in this area, as well as public transit as well. So I wanted to now research Amazon and Arlington, Virginia. But how would I find the employees? Am I going to call up Amazon and say, hey, can you send me a list of your employees in the area? Absolutely not. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I could use a little bit of creativity here. And this is the part where, if you understand just the idea of the framework of what I'm going to do here, you can apply this to other ideas that you may have in the future. So here on LinkedIn, which if you're unaware of LinkedIn, it's one of the most used sites by professionals. I would say 99% of folks who are under the age of 40 and worked for a white collar job have a LinkedIn account. So here I typed in software engineer as an example. Most people think that LinkedIn just has jobs. No, you can also search people as well. So if I search people, I'm going to see there's 13 million people that have some sort of tag of software engineer on LinkedIn. Way too many. So I go here now to Amazon, filter on the company, and then I can go specifically to a location, for example, Washington, D.C., search results. Now I have about 2,500 folks. Knowing the employee is one step, right? But if we're going to help them with a win-win solution with their property, we need to know where they live, right? Where their property is. So you can use sites like Fast People Search for free to be able to search individuals and what their mailing addresses are. At this stage, I had shown my partner this and he was like, that's so creepy. But in reality, if you're new to real estate, like this is what people do in real estate on a regular basis to be able to find leads. It's called skip tracing. So as I'm going through this process, it's really manual, right? Copying employees from LinkedIn, putting it here, and then searching information on the address, which some people will tell you to hire a virtual assistant to do that. That's very backwards. You could use technology. So here, there's a ton of scrapers, and they all have different benefits to each of them. So I'm on Phantom Buster right now, which is known for being able to scrape social media really well. So I thought maybe I could use this to scrape this list and put it into a spreadsheet. So that's what I did. Within only a couple seconds, I had a list of leads. But now I have to enter these leads in here, which was going to take time. So I used Scrape Peek, which allows you to put name, address, location, and be able to get skip tracing data, which batch data also has skip tracing, and I'll touch on that in a moment. And me being cheap, I wanted a simple solution. So I used Google Colab to kind of stitch everything together, which is basically running Python on the cloud. And here are the results. So again, being cheap, I put this database in Google Sheets instead of like doing AWS or anything. I have on one side the employees, and now my scrapers using an API, I'm able to just basically loop through this and quickly skip trace each of the individuals. So in this essence, I'm enriching my data almost like magic. And as a quick recap, because I know I'm walking through things rather quickly, my workflow for this hypothesis was to find news articles for RTO. Did that. Identify the companies with mandates. Search employees on LinkedIn and do skip tracing for the mailing address and location. But there's something very critical here that I am missing. What I'm missing is here is owner and property data. Because of course, we need to understand a lot more than just a mailing address. We need to understand equity levels, other distress levels, when the property was recently sold, to be able to make a holistic picture of these leads and be able to filter or sort which could be our top leads. So how did I actually get this data? As you could see from this link here, we worked with batch service to be able to enrich these leads. And again, this is irrespective of RTO. You could use batch data to be able to enrich other sets of leads that you have. For this particular dashboard, if you do browse through it, just note, which is in red, we have redacted PII, personal identifiable information, for not compliance reasons, but just I would say best practice reasons. So if you see here, phone number masked, we use random names to replace the actual data. But in essence, you can get any of these fields from batch data, like owner equity, bedroom, as well as skip tracing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ivo to talk a little bit more about batch service and how their API brings leads to life with owner and property data.
Hey, Ariel, thanks for having me. Sorry guys, I just joined, so I'm usually used to working on two monitors, so I'm gonna try to do my best to kind of cover some of the stuff and give you just some idea of what batch data is. I'm excited also just to kind of put batch data in. Just to give you guys an update of what batch data is today, it's transformed over the years. But today, you know, we consider ourselves a revolutionary data intelligence platform that's transforming the real estate industry, not only for investors, but software applications. If you've been in the industry long enough, some of the applications you might have used are most likely powered by our data and APIs on the back end. And in today's competitive market, information isn't just power, it's the key to staying ahead. And really, the batch data is a comprehensive data platform that provides investors, agents, home service companies, and other software applications with access to a wealth of information, including property ownership records, mortgage data, foreclosure listings, demographics insights, as well as nationwide MLS data. In addition to the contact information for really nearly every single person in the United States. Just to kind of give you just a rough idea, we have about 360 million, or the contact information for about 360 million people in the country. And in terms of what like makes our data different, honestly, I have 2 other business partners, and we decided years and years ago, this was probably 2018, early 2019, that we never wanted to rely on a single source of data or vendor. So in order for us to have the highest quality and accuracy in the market, we had to get our hands on as much data as possible. So we went out and purchased all the property data available from various companies and local assessor and recorder offices. And some of this data really goes back, you know, about 100, 120 years. And we did the same for demographics, permits, phones, and emails, etc. This data is then ingested and compiled into our data intelligence platform, and we use Databricks in the back end. After which it goes through a series of just data transformation rules, and we layer all of our proprietary rules and logic before it goes into our production layer, where our customers can utilize the data that you were showcasing like earlier. So what does this mean for the typical user? Well, it means that they can use the platform both as a technical user that wants to utilize their APIs or bulk data delivery, but also as a non-technical user, as an investor, somebody looking to get some deals that wants to utilize their platform and data in an easy-to-use like just software application. Today we have over 130,000 users that are using our application and data in various forms. And that ranges from just, again, the typical mom and pop type investor looking to get started in the industry to someone like very large publicly traded companies that are utilizing our data and API feeds for underwriting and insurance use cases. And you guys know in the industry where like timing is everything, like batch data, just generally speaking, like allows you to save time, reduce costs, and most importantly, outpace the competition. We also provide some other services such as CRM enrichment product, where we keep, this is actually our newest product offering. We are still actually unreleased to the general public, but we've been beta testing it for about 4 or 5 months now. And it's a product where we keep people's CRM data up to date and give you the insights and what leads you should be spending your time focusing on, and at the same time eliminating leads that are most likely to that are most likely not going to convert. So for example, with some of the stuff that we've done over the past 4 or 5 months with that product, I can tell you that about 30 to 35% of people's CRMs have leads that have recently sold. And obviously, if you're an investor, those leads are most likely not going to resell again in the near future. So giving these insights to the top investors in the country makes your sales teams that much better. We do work with some of the largest investors in the country that do upwards of 500, 700 deals annually. And we've really automated their CRMs and cleansing processes to give them the insights they need to stay ahead of the competition. So happy to answer any questions. If anybody has any question that I can answer about any of our offerings, and honestly just here in the call to support you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Ivo. Yeah, for anyone who has questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Ivo will stay for a couple of maybe 15 minutes or so. So please put those questions in now. And I can personally attest, when I first started getting into this space of real estate, wanting to look at data, one of the challenges was that a lot of APIs solely were for larger institutions. And what's really great, Ivo, is with batch data, someone can get even started as a solo investor with even just $50 to start using the API and readily be able to do so day of. So if you are interested, batch data is towards the end of this RTO leads methodology, and more information similar to what you both spoke about, property data, skip tracing, address verification, and more. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Liam to give us a little bit more insight of what some of these deals look like.
All right. Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you so much, Ivo. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Can you all see my screen? Perfect. So we've talked a lot today about on-market, off-market, all sorts of stuff. Now, for those of you who are looking to find an investment property, of which I assume is many of you, one of the things that you're going to be looking for is cash flow. Now, as you'll know, interest rates are still pretty high. They are starting to come down, but if you're looking to buy an investment property, 30-year fixed loan, you'll probably be looking at something around 6.5%. That will mean that most properties nationwide will not cash flow. So one of the things that we can do to help sort of mitigate that is to look at properties whereby we could buy them either with seller financing or subject to. And that's one of the things that our piece of software, Coffee Closers, can really, really help you to accomplish. So what we're doing here is we're pulling in all of the properties currently listed for sale within this particular county, which is Hillsborough County, Florida, where Tampa is. And what we're doing is we're trying to help you determine what are the most cash flowing properties in the most up and coming neighborhoods, which comes from this heat map you can see here, with the best condition. So that means fixer-uppers or not fixer-uppers, depending on your preference, which you can select here. And then finally, what deals would actually give you the best probability of closing on creative terms? For that, we're looking at a lot of different variables, such as was the property inherited? Is it for sale by owner? Has it just been put back on market after having been an expired listing? Is it like an out-of-state absentee owner who's looking to sell off portions of their portfolio? Classic sort of retiring landlord situation. So there's a lot of detail I could go into here, but ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're trying to speed up your search to find the best properties that could work either for seller finance or for subject to. And to really determine that, we're also, to determine which properties are best for seller finance or subject to, we're also doing a lot of analysis into the equity levels. Does the seller have a mortgage? What's their estimated interest rate? So on and so forth. From there, we can actually look at properties and really, really analyze them. Now, I'm going to go for one of the properties, which is actually coming from Ariel's list of leads. The person who owns this particular property, this is actually an off-market lead. The seller who owns, the person who owns this property is an Amazon tech worker in Virginia, or at least who belongs to the Virginia office, who quite recently bought this property over in Maryland. Now, this owner is going to be in this difficult position because now they're going to have to be commuting quite some distance to the Virginia office. This could be a very, very long commute. Now, the reason why I've picked this property to analyze together is because, as you can see, the estimated equity level here is quite low, only about 5.4%. What that means is that if this seller tomorrow tried to sell this property so that they could move closer to the Virginia office, and they sold it on the MLS, on the open market, they would almost certainly be underwater once realtors had been paid, closing costs, so on and so forth. So this could be a fantastic property to try to pick up on subject to. So if we did that, what would that actually look like? So here on this calculator, we can very, very quickly run the numbers. So let's offer something around the lines of 660,000, which is approximately what Zillow says that the property is worth. The owner has about 35K in equity, so we can pay that off with a 5.3% down payment, which is what you can see here, which is 35 grand as a down payment. This now means that the seller is out of the deal. They have no equity left, so we don't have to worry about them anymore. The only other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be paying off their mortgage payments as if they were our own. And you can see that down here. So their estimated payment is quite high, $3,760. We're going to be making those payments on their behalf from now on. Now, much like most properties really in the Northeast, which have, any level of space to them and are in fairly good condition, this property is expensive. So if you were to try and get a classic tenant in here for a long-term rental, there is no way that your estimated rent of $2,000 here would cover the estimated costs, which you can see down here in terms of mortgage and taxes and so on. This would be a grossly negatively cash flowing property. So what can we do here? We got to get a little bit creative once more. So why don't we look at a lease option for our exit strategy as opposed to a long-term rental? What that basically means is that instead of finding someone to just sort of rent this property to, here's what we'll do. We'll buy this property, as we said, on subject to, and we'll assume that the property is worth about $660,000. What we'll then do is we'll add a 5% markup to this property. Now that brings us to 693. We'll then find a tenant buyer. This is somebody who has either no credit score or poor credit, who cannot get a loan to actually buy a property of their own, but perhaps they have some cash. So what we'll do with this tenant buyer is we'll say, look, if you can give me a 5% option fee, which is basically just a down payment, what that will basically mean is you can secure an option to buy this property from me at today's market value in 3 years from now. So let's dig into the financials. How will this deal actually work, and how much will we be cash flowing? So in terms of money in the deal, we've put 35 grand into the deal, but our tenant buyer is already giving us 34 grand back, which is 5% of the new purchase price, which means we're basically in the deal for nothing, $865, which is fantastic. We're then going to be charging this tenant buyer 9% interest on their monthly payments, which is actually quite standard for someone with little to no credit. This means that this tenant buyer is going to be paying us $5,300 per month, which will more than cover all of our expenses that we can see here, providing us with $820 in monthly cash flow and a cash-on-cash return of well over 1,000%, which is quite fantastic. I've also zeroed out vacancy rates because with a tenant buyer, the whole point is that the tenant buyer will stay in the deal for 3 years, and you know that they'll stay in the deal because they've given you a non-refundable 5% option fee. So we can safely cancel out vacancy rates. Similarly, typically you wouldn't have a property manager for this kind of a deal either. So we're looking at some fantastic cash flow for 3 whole years. Then in 3 years from now, this tenant buyer will have the option to pay off the remaining principal owed on this property to basically buy this property off me, in which case I will be exiting the deal in 3 years from now. If this tenant buyer cannot get a loan and rebuild their credit within these 3 years, then they'll walk away from the deal. We'll keep their non-refundable option fee. We'll keep all of the cash flow that they've provided us with. And then we can just do this again with another tenant buyer or switch our exit strategy if we wish to do so. So as we can see, this could potentially be a great deal from the specific leads list that Ariel has just compiled. So in other words, a tech worker working for the Virginia office, now living in Maryland, has low equity. We could take over their loan on subject to because they're underwater. And this is a way that we can make sure that we are cash flowing and making this a good deal for us, even though the rent to price ratio wouldn't be ideal on a classic long-term rental. So where do we go from here? Well, we've got to pitch this deal to the seller here. We've got to make sure they understand how this deal works so that they take us seriously. So I'm going to click generate offer. And what that will do is it'll take the specific terms which we've inputted into the calculator, and it'll generate a great letter of intent that explains that, first of all, we're going to be providing them with a down payment to clear off all of their equity from the deal, which is a great thing for them. They don't have to pay off any realtors or anything like that. The other things as well, and I'm just going to open up this letter of intent. Let's see here. Okay, great. Can you see my screen here? Brilliant. So this is our letter of intent. And what this basically explains, as I say, is that we're providing them with a down payment on their equity so that they're cashed out of the deal, which is great for them. We're then going to be taking over their monthly payments, which effectively means that they don't need to worry about them anymore. Yeah, so what this letter of intent will do is it'll explain the value of the deal. Then once we've done that, we can send this offer to them via email or via SMS. So yeah, that's basically the structure of the software. Just to recap, you can come here, you can look at your favorite county or the leads list which Ariel has provided you, for example, for this Virginia back to work strategy. You can go through all the leads, find the ones which have the best cash flow in the best neighborhoods in the best condition. You can come in here, you can run the numbers, you can get creative with both the acquisition strategy and your exit strategy. Then you can generate a nice letter of intent to really pitch the value. And then you can send this offer via email or SMS. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. I'm going to share my screen again. And for those who may be a little bit newer to real estate and you're like, whoa, creative finance, subject to lease options, a lot of terms maybe you haven't heard before. No worries. I was in that space when I first heard it all before in the past. But luckily today, there's a lot of resources. We have some as well. But if you wanted to, you could go say on Pace Morby's channel. A lot of great content there to learn more. So what are we offering in this sense? We have seen that a lot of folks, and it's picked up within our community as well as outside the community, want to understand how to build alternative leads lists. So starting on October 24th, we will have a live weekly mini series that will run for about 4 to 5 weeks, where I will detail exactly how I went through the RTO project. So if you are tech savvy, these steps that I have laid out here may be enough for you. But for those who are newer to the space, newer to doing web scraping, skip tracing, data aggregation, it does take more than a 45-minute webinar to really go through it. So you have myself, data expert, as well as in real estate, and Noah, who is an expert in real estate automation, plugging things into Go High Level and more on your side for this mini series. You may be thinking, Ariel, RTO does not apply to my market. There's no big employers. Or maybe I'm interested in RTO, but what happens when it fizzles out? So the fundamentals that will come from this mini training practically can help you with any other project you're looking for, right? So the fundamentals are web scraping, data aggregation, APIs, and automation. They're all essential for real estate data projects. And here's just a couple of examples. So I see a lot of folks, they want to do seller financing deals, tired landlords. These are folks who have owned properties maybe for 10 plus years towards retirement age. Well, what if we don't have the money to market to all these different leads? We could maybe use web scraping as well as data to be able to finite on top leads. Maybe we bridge this with small business owners. So we can scrape information for that, maybe even look for Facebook groups within your local area of business owners, scrape information, marry that with property data, and have a better leads list where you can score who would be more likely to possibly sell off an asset since they have multiple assets and they're spread out thin over just regular tired landlords. Another one, Hurricane Milton just came through Tampa twice. Someone may say, oh, let me try to market to all landlords in Tampa. Bad idea. You're going to waste a lot of money. But what if you end up just targeting those landlords who were affected with their non-flood zone properties with the wind, and maybe their roof, some of their shingles came off, and they have their property listed for rent. So they're not making any cash flow right now. It's listed for rent, and they're going through some tumultuous times. So if I were doing this, I would go on Zillow, scrape rentals, look specifically at Carrollwood, Riverview, Brandon, and probably Ruskin for these particular areas, then marry that again with owner information and reach out to these landlords. Now, I'm not going to go through the last example because I know we're a little bit stretched on time, but the main point I'm trying to drive here is that there's many different use cases of how you can try to get to alternative leads. And once you have the skills on the left-hand side, even if you're not the one doing it, but you know how things work and how to hire out for the next step, you're going to be ahead. And if you've zoned out at all, this is the part you do not want to miss. AI data and automation is not the future of real estate. It is actually the present. And when I first started in this space about 4 years ago, doing my own channel for tech and real estate, I mostly spoke to larger investors, those who wanted to start using APIs and data. As ChatGPT came, that really expanded. I started talking to a lot more individuals and across real estate, investors, not just investors, but agents, wholesalers, lenders as well. And what I want to get across is that basically everyone is using AI data or automation in some sense. So to be quite frank, if you are not implementing tech, whether it's with coffee closers or not, you will be left behind when it comes to being able to really have an impact in real estate. So how can you actually acquire your next deal as well as join in for our live training coming up? So we have two different plans, traditional and or creative financing. On our yearly plan, the most value you would get is our creative plan that comes with the community. So our community offers software as well as courses, office hours, and community discussions. Our group coaching has closed, but we do have courses based off of it, like fundamentals of creative finance, as well data-driven investor's guide to real estate. So whether you're at the earlier stage of investing or you're more experienced of an investor looking to bridge into newer strategies, we do have courses for both ends. And I did say, if we give you a teaser, what's to come for Coffee Closers 4.0. And I'll just leave you with this cryptic 4 letters, but the hint is BYOL. And I'm going to leave it there at that point. There's a lot more to come, but I'd love to be able to answer any questions at this stage.